Okay, folks. So I'll just start out by saying I was in a real hurry this morning, and I recorded that video really fast, which was cool. It was fun. I made it to work on time. It's all good. But anyways, hopefully you were able to keep up with that. And again, you can always pause and rewind. I modeled it, and now you may notice that this model. Um, in fact, I need to clean this up a little bit. I just realized. But you may notice that this model is not actually the model that I made this morning. And the reason for that is that I was in a real big hurry. So sure enough, I made the video, uploaded the video, and then closed Maya and never once saved. So yeah, I didn't save. So I started over. I literally just remade this again for the millionth time. No big deal. And by the way, get used to the idea that that's going to happen to you. I guarantee you, you will sometimes lose hours and hours, if not days of work from time to time. Just a fact of life. Yeah, just get used to it. Sounds really reassuring, right? It's not the end of the world. Okay, let me just save again. Okay, so anyways, that looks a little bit better. I had a little too much on my poly count there. Okay, and I said to myself, well, if I'm gonna start over and redo it, might as well do it better than I did last time, right? So that's one of the perks of starting over. You can do it better. So I actually did go back in and I did go back in and sort of recut this, so it's got the indentations there. I added, the little spots for for the axle to fit into. I did that over here as well. I sort of created that sort of curvature there, and the there. Now I could smooth this. I thought about it, but this is probably, considering where it is, I actually probably didn't need to do this either. But I wanted to, and it looks nicer. And then something else you should think about too is that you're like, well, you're never gonna see that, right? You're looking at the wagon. You're never gonna see that. Here's the thing. I've had this conversation many times. You might not you might not think that anyone's ever gonna see that until you hand this off. You hand off the model to a level designer. And what does the level designer do? The level designer says, oh, you know what? Let's flip it over. And I haven't parented or grouped anything yet, but you know what I'm saying? You're like, oh yeah, let me just give it to the level designer. Level designer's like, oh sweet, that looks really cool. First thing they do, flip it over. And like, oh, look, this has been knocked over. Or they make it dynamic. And so the player can like kick it over. And suddenly now everyone is seeing the underside of your model that you're like, oh crap, I didn't model that very nicely because I thought no one would ever see it. So you never know what the level designers are going to do. Always be thorough with your models just in case. Unless somebody has specified, somebody has said, look, just go ahead and keep it as low poly as possible. We're never going to animate it. We're never going to flip it over. Okay, sure. Then you could like be a little, then you can focus on poly counts and not as much on thoroughness. I personally would rather err on the side of thoroughness than on the side of like super low poly. That's me. Okay, so anyways, so I remodeled it, and here's my new model. I think it looks a little nicer now. And let's talk about rigging, since basically the what's being asked of you now is that, okay, you need to take all of this whole scene and everything in here and sort of clean it up and put it together. Let's do that. So first thing you want to do is, of course, go to the outliner. So if you go to Windows, Outliner, again, the outliner is a list of everything in your scene. I personally leave the outliner open as soon as I start a project. I just leave the outliner open at all times because I always want to see a list of everything in my scene. I like to keep organized. I like to keep this visible. Personally, I usually leave it on my other monitor. I just leave it open and on my other monitor. But you do what you like. And again, so that's why this is a floating window, because I like to drag it to my other monitor. But I don't have to, and I can show you what to do with it. So anyways, let's just, first of all, let's start by naming everything. And personally, I like to be in the habit of trying to, I leave this window open and I try to just name everything as I make it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'll keep modeling for a bit and I won't name things right away because I know that I'm gonna like merge things later. And when you merge things, you know, when you combine things, the names will go away and you have to rename it. But as a general rule, I try to just name things as I make them because it keeps this list a lot cleaner and easier to sort of look at and select things. This obviously is, so I'm going to double click this. This obviously is the wagon bed. So I'm going to go ahead and name it wagon bed. This is a wheel. All of these are wheels. But I'm going to end up combining some stuff anyways. So half of these names are going to disappear in a minute anyway. So, but just for the sake of just being smart about it, let's just do, okay. So wheel one, and of course it's not going to want, it's going to add the one for me because it doesn't want you to use the same name. It needs unique names, otherwise it freaks the hell out. But no big deal. So I'll let it add those things to it because it doesn't matter. This is going to be the rear axle. So I'll just do axle rear. This is the front axle, so axle front. This is basically I don't know what it's like, axle mounting, axle mount rear. Let's just call it that. I don't know if there's a technical term for that. Anyways, so. But, you know, just to be consistent in naming everything, this is going to be the steering column mount. This is going to be the actual steering column. Column. And then we have, of course, the handle. All right, so there we go. We got everything named. What do we do with it all now? And there's a ton of history. Obviously, you can see there's a ton of history on some of these, which is fine. We'll delete that later. But keeping in mind that I could delete history right now, and deleting history is important because this history, every single one of these operations starts to eat up your RAM. Just so you guys know, if your computer, like if you're using Maya and it is choking to death, frame rate just dying, camera barely moves, there's a good chance that it's because of all this history. If you've got a ton of history and a very complex scene with lots of stuff in it, yeah, sure, let's just do it now. Why not? So we'll have to do it again later anyway, but let's just do it. So delete all by type history. Now you could just do delete by type history, and there's a hotkey for it there, but that only does it on one object at a time. Personally, I prefer just doing it here. Delete all by type history, because that just wipes the whole scene clean. Everything is clean. Your RAM, it frees up a ton of RAM, and it just wipes everything clean. That way you don't have to worry about, oh crap, I forgot to delete it from this object or that object. Just delete the whole freaking, it's your whole freaking Maya file. All clean, good to go. Bam, and you see that? All that history goes away. The history from every single object in the scene now, nice and clean. I still have a lot of other stuff to do, and so again, I'll have to delete history again after I do more stuff. But let's get to that stuff. So what I was sort of talking about, I glossed over quickly earlier, was that some of these pieces need to be combined, and some of them need to be grouped or parented. The difference is which pieces need to animate and which pieces are never gonna, move independently. So what I mean by that is like the wagon bed. So the wagon bed is our main object, right? This is never going to need to move independently of the wagon bed. This is going to just travel with the wagon bed at all times. So this never needs to move independently. So I can combine that. That's also true of this. This piece here is also mounted, right? Anything that's basically mounted with screws or bolts or whatever, anything like that, it's never going to animate. It can't because it's literally bolted on, right? So those two things are for sure going to be combined. So let's just go ahead and do that. And so I'm going to shift right click combine, which again you could do up here if you wanted. But, oh, there's new things. Fun. Yeah, of course, 2018 is still pretty new, and I found some cool new features, but there's still a lot that I don't know about it. So I'll have to learn with you guys. But anyways, I'll experiment with that later. Okay, so that all needs to combine, right? So shift right click, combine. If it turns green, everything turns green. That means now this is now one solid object that if I select it, it selects the whole piece, right? And by the way, notice, look in my outliner now. It's changed these to weird sort of looking, weird little things with transforms and like weird stuff. Like all three of the things that I just combined. And if I select them, everything turns pink and it gets all weird. This is the history. When you do a combine, it keeps the old pieces in the history. So once again, the combining process is creating more history that can cause problems later if you don't delete it. So watch this. If I delete it now, edit, delete all by type, history. Look at my outliner now. Now my outliner is cleaner. A lot of those empty groups went away. It's no longer pink. There's nothing to select that turns it pink or anything. It did rename this though. Now it's Wagon Bed 1. But I can go ahead and just delete the 1. So I'll just rename it, get rid of the 1. Because that 1 is because when I combined it, it combined into Wagon Bed, and then it became Wagon Bed 1 because there's 2 wagon beds. There's 1 wagon bed in the history, 1 wagon bed there. So anyways, that's why that happened. But again, because again, Maya needs to have unique names. If you have a duplicate name somewhere, it's going to freak the hell out. Things can explode. Not good. Okay, so we've got these all combined, which is good. That's what we need. So we can combine a few more pieces. So right now we have individual wheels, and then in an axle. Well, these wheels are all combined to the axle. So the rear wheels, rear axle, those can all be combined because this wheel is never going to spin independently of that wheel, or independently of the axle. Like they're all combined at the axle. They all spin together, right? So might as well combine them all. So grab all 3 of those, shift right click, combine. That is all now one solid piece. And again, I can delete history, all by type history. This is now, I can just rename this. Instead of axle rear, I can call it wheels rear. Wheels rear. Little Family Guy reference. Wheels rear. Okay. So there we go. We got wheels rear. Good to go. Same can be done here. I can take the same that wheel, this axle, that wheel. Shift right click, combine, and I can. Well, at first let's do this. Edit, delete all by type, history, clean it up. Call it wheels front. Wheels rear, wheels front. Again, those things make sense to go together. It makes sense to combine those because those move independently of the rest of the model, like the rest of the stuff we have, but they don't move independently of each other. Again, this wheel doesn't move separate from that wheel. They all turn together. And if you want to see that in preview, look, okay, cool. The wheels move. That's fun. And they all spin together. And ironically, it just happened to work out that the pivot point is already basically where it needs to be. And you could double check that. If you really look at it from the side, the wheels should already, or the pivot point should already be where it needs to be. If it's not, the wheels would kind of wobble funny. And you'd have to sort of fix it. You'd have to find a better place for the pivot points. And that should only happen. You would only get that wobble if these things weren't lined up perfectly. Like the axle cylinder, and the cylinders that were created, that you created the wheels out of, if those weren't lined up perfectly like we did earlier, then you probably would have a pivot point that's sort of off-centered, a little funky, and then that could be a problem. You'd get a wheel wobble. Wobble. Wheel wobble. Anyways, point is, this should be fine. So far so good. Wheels rear, wheels front, wagon bed. Now we've got handle and a steering column. So we've basically combined, at this point we've already combined everything that we can combine. Everything else that we need to put together has to be combined, put together in a hierarchy for animation purposes. Okay, now let me clarify this. If this whole model was meant to be a prop in a scene that's never going to animate and it's never going to be posed, like you don't want to give the level designer a chance to sort of pose it or do anything with it. It's literally just, this is the model and this is exactly how it stays. You could just combine the entire thing, and at this point hierarchies are pointless. Like, just combine the whole damn thing and shove it in the scene. But you'll lose the ability to position the handle, steer it, animate it, basically do anything with it. Again, it just depends on what the requirements are of your scene, and like, does the level designer want more control over it, or you just, here's the model, throw it in the scene, good luck. Okay, so let's assume that you want to make this rigged so that the level designer can pose it, animators can animate it, and so forth. So getting to that, there's always different ways to do this. You can always rig things differently in different ways, and some rigs are easier to use and so forth, but let's just make this as simple as possible. So first of all, the rear wheels just follow the wagon bed around. There's no steering there. There's nothing going on. The wheels follow the wagon bed, and that's just pretty much as simple as it gets. So wheels rear, what you're going to do is you could select it here. Easiest thing to do. And again, there's a bunch of ways you could do this. But the easiest way to do it, I find, is in the outliner. Select wheels rear, left click on it, select it here, middle mouse click and drag. And when you middle mouse, I'm holding down middle mouse click, you see there's a plus sign now. If I middle mouse click and drag onto the wagon bed, it's created this situation here where there's a little plus sign underneath wagon bed now, and this is sort of a visual explanation of which things are parented to which things. So the wheels rear is now parented to the wagon bed. And what does that actually mean? What it means is, if I select the wagon bed, I can move the entire unit, right? The entire unit, the wagon bed, the wheels now follow the wagon bed, but I also have the ability to select the rear wheels as well, independently, and also spin those. And if you really want to sort of get carried away, if you really want to like rig this nicely to make sure that it's animatable and just keep things from going crazy, you could have some fun with it. So these wheels only need to spin this way. You don't want to spin them this way. You don't want to spin them this way. Only on the X axis, right? And you see that the rotate X starts to update as I do that. So the rotate X is all you really need to worry about. You don't ever want to spin them on the other axes. You can do it here, like you can do this, and then they rotate with the bed of the wagon, which is what's supposed to happen, right? Anyways, point is, if you really want, you can do this. Go here to the channel box layer editor. Rotate X is all you need. All these other ones, you can highlight them. Left click and drag to highlight them. Right click and do lock selected. And then you can do that here for these as well. I'm basically doing everything except for rotate X, doing lock selected. What does that do? It keeps those jerk animators from breaking your rig. What I mean is, animators always screw things up. They always break the rigs. But if you lock all these attributes, check it out. Rotate X is the only thing that works now. You can only rotate X. Everything else is locked, so that the animators can't break it. Cool. So far, so good. wagon bed. I can I can kind of move the wagon bed around, um, and the wheels follow it, and then the wheels can rotate the way that they're supposed to if I want. Now, these wheels, again, need to be able to rotate on their axes, which is fine. That works. But they also need to be able to follow the steering column. The steering column is what changes the orientation of those wheels, right? That's what it should be following. So what we're going to do is take wheels front and middle mouse drag onto the steering column, which means now, oh wait, haha. So this is what happens. This is going to get kind of crazy. Watch this. Oh, it didn't get crazy. Haha. It should. It's likely to get crazy. Let me do this properly though. Let me back up a minute because sometimes I get carried away and I forget things. So I'm gonna undo that. In fact, by the way, to unparent, there's a couple ways you could do it. I could select it and hit Shift P. P is parent, Shift P is unparent. Just so you know, if you want to use hotkeys instead of the middle mouse dragging. The other way I could have done that, by the way, is middle mouse drag and then just drag until there's a line in between. If I drag onto this, it would parent it to the handle. But if I drag in between two things, it just basically unparents, which is fine. Anyways, point is, before you parent anything, look for this. You see how this particular model, if you look in the channel box, you see how there's values here in the channel box? You never want to parent something that already has values associated to it. So this one's clean. If you select it, it's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then scale 1, 1, 1. That's basically a clean no transforms model, right? Which is fine. This one though, this has transforms on it. There's some translates. There's a little bit of scale. You need to clean that out before you parent anything to it. Otherwise, this thing, the thing you parent to it, can explode, literally explode sometimes. If you parent it this to this, sometimes if you rotate this, literally the model could explode because it's got all these crazy transforms and it's applying double transforms and things just get really weird. It didn't happen this time, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be careful. You should always be careful and always do the proper. So the reason I didn't have to do that earlier, by the way, when I was parenting these other things, is when I did the combining. When you combine stuff, it zeroes these out anyways. So doing a combine will zero. You don't need to freeze transforms because it zeroes things out. But this one, there was no combining. I didn't have to combine this to anything, so it still had transforms from when I was doing the modeling. So first thing, okay, grab it, modify, freeze transformations right here. Modify freeze transformations, and you see now it is 0, 0, 0, 0, and then 1, 1, 1. Perfect. This is a nice clean frozen transforms model. I can take this wheels front, middle mouse drag it onto the steering column. That is a much better hierarchy. This is now rigged better because now I can rotate the steering column and I can rotate the wheels. But I'll undo those real quick. I also can go ahead and lock these axes too, right? So same thing. I can lock everything except for rotate X. Lock all of that. All right, cool. Now rotate X is the only thing that works on this. This is great. This one though, if I really want to again lock the animators out so they can't break stuff. This one I would have to do the something similar, except for instead it's rotate Y. So rotate Y is the only axis that should work on this one. So again, I can lock those out. Now again, rotate Y works here, but that's the only thing that works. And then rotate X is the only thing that works here. Far so good, making some progress. The handle is actually kind of already set up pretty well because of the way I modeled it this time. The handle actually is already set up with the pivot point in the right spot. But I should cover pivot points. Ironically, I modeled this too good. Like I modeled it in a way that put the pivot points where they were supposed to be before I even had to worry about it. So I should demonstrate. I'll demonstrate pivot points in a minute. But actually, I'll do it right now. What the hell? So right now the pivot point is where it's supposed to be. It should be rotating from right here. If it was in the wrong spot though, if the pivot point was like up here for some reason, like if I started modeling my cube up here and extruded down to make it to here, the pivot point might be in the wrong spot. And then again, this is not good. Always double check that your pivot point is where it should be. And to do that, to move the pivot, in case I'm pretty sure I've covered it. I know I've covered it in my modeling videos on my channel. I know I've covered this at some point. But if you're not watching those and you only watch this video, it's the D key. It's also the insert key. The insert key works, but for those Macintosh lame people, there is no insert key on a Mac, so you have to use the D key. Anyways, point is, that's how you move the pivot, and then you can move it wherever you want. And then now if I rotated it now, it would rotate from that pivot. But I'm not going to. I'm going to undo because it's already where it needs to be. It needs to pivot from right there, and that feels good. But now what I need to do, again, here's another scenario. Look at the channel box. There's values there. I need to clean those values out. Because again, the handle was one of those things where I didn't combine anything. So let's clean out, modify, freeze transformations, zero those out. So that this is, and by the way, one thing that you should know about freezing transformations, this is now, when you freeze transformations, this is now the new neutral position and orientation and scale. So this is zeroed out, which means if I start to rotate, it adds values, right? It's now adding values. But the beauty of this is, if I want to zero this out, if I want to put it back to its neutral state, I can just type in 0, and it's right back to where the neutral state is. That's one of the best reasons, aside from things exploding. But this is another good reason to freeze transforms on stuff, because now there's a neutral value for everything here. Everything here, I can, if I'm animating, for instance, if I'm animating stuff and I need to get back to a neutral, like I want to go back to the neutral pose where it's not posed at all, I can just zero things out and it works. Now this one, of course, is the sort of the root, the main one. So I'll leave that one alone because it's zeroed out, which is cool. But I mean, I'll leave it alone in terms of locking it. But let's finish this. Okay, so handle, middle mouse click and drag the handle onto the steering column. So if you really look at this hierarchy now, oh, and I actually also need to take the steering column and attach it to the wagon bed. So the wagon bed is going to be the main parent of everything. So basically now I can rotate the wagon, I can spin the wheels on, you know, on both of these. I can spin the wheels here and here. I can steer, and I can also position the handle. Oh, and the handle, I should lock that too. So let's do that. So the handle, of course, only should rotate on the X. Okay, so let's just do that. So rotate X, lock everything else. So lock. Okay, cool. There we go. This is pretty well set up now. I can pose this. I can pose this. I can move this around. I can animate this. But this is set up. In fact, you know what? Let's just call this good enough for this video. This video is covering basically, you're labeling all your stuff. You're getting it into a hierarchy that makes sense. This is now the root of the hierarchy. This is the main thing, right? So you could do anything you want with this, and then the rest of the pieces follow it, and then you could independently move these other pieces as well. And again, if you want to set it back to a neutral position, all you got to do is go back to the values 0, 0, steering column 0, and it's back to its neutral position, so that you can start fresh with a new animation, new scene, new whatever. Pretty fun. And of course you could duplicate the wagon. and the wagon, the duplicate wagon now still has the hierarchy set up. So you could still, this is all rigged. You could pose this one, animate that one. So anyways, cool. So far so good. Hopefully you guys learned a lot from that. Again, keeping your hierarchy clean, making sure you're deleting history, making sure you're naming everything. Combine anything that's never going to need to move independently. Those things could get combined. Anything that does need to move independently, like steering column and so forth, yeah, then parent it. And obviously make sure the hierarchy goes in an order that makes sense. So here, I mean, you could just look at this, but the rear wheels are just following the wagon bed. Obviously, those don't need to be steered, right? There's no steering on those. So those don't, no, those go sort of directly to the wagon bed. The steering column, though, follows the wagon bed, but also controls these two things. So these two things, like if those were just parented to the wagon bed, you wouldn't be able to steer. So, so it should, I mean, hopefully this makes sense to you. And that's one of the reasons I prefer the outliner. That's one of the reasons I like to have this open, because I can look at the way this is sort of set up, and just by looking at this, I can tell what's controlling what, and you know what the main pieces are, and which parts move independently. Okay, I think that's it. Like I said, you can animate, but animation, I don't think I'm gonna cover that right now. I think I'll just I'll call this a final. Wrap up this video. You guys have this now. Here's how to put it together, get the scene sort of organized. Oh, and one thing that was mentioned. Okay, so check it out. It was mentioned that you should keep the wheels like sitting on the grid. Yeah, okay, sure. So make sure that the wheels, the bottom of the wheels are just kind of sitting on the grid. Might be easier if you really want to make sure it's exactly where it needs to be. Just create a plane, because the grid is a little deceptive. It's a little bit hard to sort of see if it's exactly sitting on the plane. But if you create an actual plane, and by the way, the plane right now, if you look, it's translate x, y, and z 0, 0, 0. That means it's exactly on the grid. It's right on the grid. So anyways, if you create an actual floor plane, it's a little easier to then just look at it. If it's dipping into the plane, then obviously it's down too low. So just line it up. Just line it up to where it's not really penetrating. Just sort of eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about it. But yeah, just eyeball it. Make sure it's sitting on the ground plane. And then if you want, you could delete the plane. Or again, if you want a better grade, then you can create an environment, add some stuff. Some of you have already, sometimes maybe you already put some stuff in the wagon. Stuff in the wagon would be cool. Add some personality. Stuff in the wagon, environment around the wagon. I don't know, playground. New York City streets. Maybe a backyard. Maybe post-apocalyptic. Maybe not. I don't know. Make something cool. Because this is basically a C. You do that. If you do this right, it's a C. Oh, and everything you add, if you add stuff, same procedure. Name it, organize it. Group it or combine it if you need to. Make a hierarchy if it's something that needs to animate or pose or in some way. And yeah, have fun with it. Make something interesting. I don't know. Put something interesting together. Maybe there's like guns mounted to this. Maybe there's guns mounted to this, and it's being driven by a teddy bear that has an eye patch, and he's just got scars and eye patches, and he's like the ruthless teddy bear that drives this wagon around and murders people. I don't know. You should know, and you should do something. Make this awesome. All right. Because this is, it looks okay, but it's pretty boring just by itself. Do more to it. Okay, anyways, that's enough for now. Good luck, everyone. Have fun.